Just stay there.
Good morning. This is Eugene Chittick. I do have a little Boy Scout Christmas tree cough, I make. I'm here today representing Mountain Life Flight. Their general manager is in the office, Keith Crosby. And I would make a request that for the next board meeting, December 16th, 2 items be added to that agenda. And I've spoken with Mr. Egan, and I'm happy to meet with him later this week to provide any documents. But those 2 items specifically are to discuss the draft RFP for emergency medical services in the area of inter-facility transports. It's a very specific issue, and we'd like to bring some areas that are concerned both in the hospital and in the community related to that proposal. In addition, we have a proposal that I think the county will embrace quite tightly, and that's Mountain Life Flight is putting together a proposal for ambulance service in North County. They've already had several meetings, and they're in the process, that's zone 2, and they're in the process of putting together a proposal for the county. And in some regards, those 2 items are somewhat connected, and we'll go through those. But we would like the opportunity on the agenda to discuss them, answer the board's questions. We'll have, I believe there's some decent banner staff here as well, and we'll hopefully answer your questions, provide you some input and a different perspective than I think you've received so far. And I would offer an invite to Mr. Powell. I know you're on the NorCal board, to sit down with me and we'll get you up to speed on where we're intending to go. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Happy holidays.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can move the chairs around or what. I'd like everybody that's involved in this agenda off. Everybody outside be aware of.
Okay, gentlemen, Mountain Life Flight has reviewed the proposed Lassen County EMS transportation plan, and they took exception with 2 specific paragraphs within that proposed transportation plan, and they also appear in the draft RFP that's been circulated.
and the board hasn't received copies of that yet.
Transportation plan, we have that.
That,
Draft
but the
RFP.
RFP, but the RFP we have.
The draft RFP is not out yet.
Okay, and those, and I'm understanding the state still is not active on the transportation plan. The page, you'll note that these 2 sections appear at page 10, line 5, and page 13, and they relate to inter-facility ambulance transports. And so you understand what we're talking about. You know, there's roughly about 24 of these a year. At least last year there was roughly 24. The next slide. And these 2 sections in the RFP have no benefit to Lassen County residents because of the following areas. It removes an ambulance that's currently providing critical care. In other words, if they're in the RFP, they will have to pull one of their ambulances off to assist in that transport. Currently, Mountain Life Flight, and for over 20 years, Mountain Life Flight has a designated ambulance that takes these inter-facility critical care patients from the hospital back to the airport to be flown. Most of these, in fact, nearly all last year were fixed-wing transports. We're not talking about helicopter transports. Helicopter lands at the hospital and they're loaded on. These are fixed wings transports that have to be taken from the hospital to the airport. And Mountain Life Flight staff because they have specific training, they're above the normal training that is provided by your ALS ambulance paramedics. Go to the next slide. And they have, these are trauma patients that generally need blood while in transport. They're patients with a high-level infection that needs antibiotic infusion. And then there's the heart attack patient that will need a pump for nitroglycerin infusion. These patients, generally, the staff that are currently transporting the ALS paramedics aren't qualified to give the first two. The third one, they can utilize a pump, but those ambulances presently are not equipped with the pump. So they have to either borrow the equipment, they're trained on it, or not is another issue. So because these presently have been transported by Mountain Lifeline, when this was suddenly taken out and put in the RFP, obviously Mountain Lifeline is concerned and wanted to address it. One of the next slide. One of the issues that we want to point out, back in January 2004, the EMS operations that were available to Lassen County were roughly 6 ambulances, 2 in the South Lassen EMS, 2 Lassen ambulance, 1 critical care transport that was Mountain Lifeline, and then Modoc County Modoc Medical Center in Aden had one. Flash forward to December 4th, 2004. The services were at 3 ambulances in Zone 1 through South Lassen EMS and 1 through Zone 2 in Modoc County. At that point, our county emergency services chief, Chip Jackson, declared an emergency because Lassen ambulance had withdrawn 2 ambulances. Several of you on this board, I think, have that history in mind. There was obviously a payment issue that wasn't coming from the state, and they made a business decision to no longer provide service. But under that emergency declaration, our current EMS operations are at that same level. In fact, they're a little below that because North County doesn't have an ambulance presently. So we're operating today at a lower rate or equal to that rate that an emergency was declared in this county. And if in exchange for deleting these 2 paragraphs and guaranteeing that Mountain Lifeline continues to utilize the vehicles that they have, utilize the staff that they have, they are prepared to offer to North County a 12-year deal which would guarantee an ambulance service in North County. 12 months. Or 12 months. Did I say 12 years? Yeah. That's a little longer. 12-month deal that would provide an ambulance service in North County. I can't tell you, I wasn't part of the discussion process why North County was left out of the present plan. I don't know whether it's a cost issue. I don't think cost could ever justify not providing ambulance service to our county residents, but that wasn't the choice I was involved in.
When that plan was created, they had service and they did not want to change the service they had, so they actually opted and wanted not to be included. So it wasn't a question that they were like all of a sudden kicked to the curb. Since that time, their service level has dissolved or disappeared, so now it's a different ballgame, and we obviously have to deal with that issue.
They had, specifically they had, we do not want to be part of your EOA.
Yes.
That is why they were not in it.
Well, as part of Mountain Lifeline's proposal, they will provide a complete ambulance service there. They support the Big Valley community. In fact, they've already had some meetings there discussing how that proposal will benefit the community. It will also include membership plans, both ground and air, for that portion of the community up there. So I'd ask you to consider it. We're happy to sit down and discuss fine details with the board, but I think in exchange for what we've asked to be given to the left out of the RFP and maintain the level of service that Mountain Lifeline presently provides to the community, I think it's important that you look at the overall picture. What Mountain Lifeline has provided this community for 30 plus years is a viable entity that supports, pays tax, hires nearly 35 people in this community, and any attempt to kind of erode their little bit of market share may be the straw that broke the camel's back. So we've asked that you look at that, you determine the viability of the plan, and you give some feedback. We're prepared. I believe it's about 45 days out, depending on NorCal's involvement, to put an ambulance up there. They're prepared to commit to that today. Any questions?
Yeah, we have a lot of questions. More than we have time for. But it makes it sound pretty easy to put an ambulance up in, I guess you could say in Aiden. Would it be Aiden? Would it be Beaver? Knowing the cost of an ambulance, and the small amount of calls up there, it's not financially feasible.
Well, I know that has been said, and that's been the justification, I think, for leaving it out of the RFP. And it's there is a slim profit margin, if any profit margin, but I think for whatever reason that's been a choice to leave that out of the RFP, and I don't think it's a viable one. I think our county residents deserve more.
Well, wait a minute, again, it's been left out of the RFP because that was left out of the EOA, and they don't want to be part of that EOA.
Well,
It's
today,
not our decision. This board didn't make the decision. The people made that decision.
okay,
I do know the history.
but the fact are, as it says here, it is left out of the RFP. And MoDOT, North County is without ambulance service, and we're trying to
And they just wrote it down, what, a $45 tax for putting in, take you and me out to lunch. You have their own, they wrote it down. And then the next agenda item is to put that back on the ballot. So, I mean,
and that will take approximately 12 months or so to get that back on the ballot, I'm told. And so Mountain Lifeline's offering a Band-Aid of some sort to provide.
well, my concern is what is the of some sort? Is it reality or is it just political moves?
Well, obviously, we're in the position to provide ambulance service.
There's all people that say. And so is mine. But anyhow, you asked the questions, I just...
Any questions?
I can answer to that, actually, more.
Greg, your name.
My name is Brian Gray, Program Director of Mountain Lifeline. We had a similar situation about 10 years ago in a small community of Greenville in Plymouth County. This was an area that had both a hospital and an ambulance for many years. A lot of the residents, elderly, rural, ranching community. And as times as they were, things diminished, replenished, and went away. They were pretty proactive. They did basically what Big Valley's doing now. They're trying to form a JPA and create an ambulance district. They did get a tax $65 a parcel. And basically with a little bit, even then, we went in there without truly a contract or anything else as a commitment to the community. Over time, and it has worked out. They run a few more calls than Big Valley does, but we are able to financially sustain a full-time ALS ambulance 24/7 through 65 in that community, and we have for over 10 years. We just renewed our contractor over there, and the IVASA board is extremely happy with us. We are content to be there. It basically covers its own cost. We're not dealing any money out of that county, but it covers itself. It gives us a chance to provide jobs, and it creates the coverage that it always had. This is a similar situation. That's why I think
That's good, and I'm thankful for it. I mean, I've always supported you people. At the end of this month, I've been on this board 16 years. I've always supported you. You support the country, the county, and the community. You're good people. There's no problem there. Go back to Greenville. I think when you went in there, my wife grew up in Trinity. She said there is a ambulance tax people voted on years ago to form an ambulance, and you people are receiving it. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you are getting a subsidy.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
There is not one available in A and B.
And it's my understanding that the last one did not pass by a very slim margin. I think you'll hear from them today. I think they're trying to review that.
But I guess what I'm saying is, you're not going to promote off it. You're using Greenville as, we went in there, we fixed it. You also are trusting a subsidy from the community to help you make it work, which I'm appreciative and I'm glad. I'm not trying to put you down, but because people need to understand all the facts that are involved in this, and most people do not.
Well, I think the facts are already out there. They're making an earnest effort to make the district. They've made an earnest effort to pass the thing. I have not asked for anything going in there other than to try to be part of the solution. If it's not a long-term solution, then it's not. But I think a long-term solution, I think everybody in this room's looked at it. It has to come from somewhere. And I'm just offering to be part of that solution, even for a short term, until a viable solution comes up on the table.
Okay, Supervisor, I won't have anything, but you know, it's really not fair to this side. We give it 15 minutes. I don't know. We got to figure out what to do with the way this was passed. So we need to hear from the board, a short vote, and then obviously this needs to get a healthy conversation. Sure.
I had a question for the 12-month proposal just to get on the record. Is that going to be ALS or BLS? Is that going to be 24/7? Is that going to be part-time? What's your...
It's going to be ALS 24/7. That's really the only kind of service we would offer. I think it's the only kind of service that it's in today's day and age. I think that's a minimum. I think it's sort of an all-or-nothing thing. I don't even think we would have support from NorCal if it was anything other than 24/7, 365 ALS coverage.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chick made the statement that there is an ambulance coverage in North Carolina. I'd just like our emergency operations chief to address it. I think that's
Dr. Eric Ewing, Lassen County OES chief. As far as what Big Valley has right now, we're talking about the Lassen County side of Big Valley. They're utilizing mutual aid from neighboring entities, whether it's Modoc Medical from basically Last Frontier and what's now out of Alturas, whether it's Burning Ambulance or Mayor's Medical or Sender from the south side. It's based upon mutual aid request for the closest forces, the closest resource. It's a system that's in place right now, and it was put in place at the time when lead ambulance ceased offering. That's the current program we're right now. It will continue to be until something else happens.
I just wanted to clarify that.
If somebody else wanted to put an ambulance in there, like not modified, they can do that.
It's an open market. It's
It's
not part of the
It's not part of the EA, so they can do it tomorrow. They don't have to make all their changes in transportation plans to do it. Do it.
That's correct. That is absolutely correct. However, in order for them to make this commitment, they asked the county to address this issue. It was never in the RFP before.
I don't
And
think.
presently it has been in the RFP draft, and I don't see any justification for it other than to create a delay for patient care.
Well, I can't believe that the number of inter-facility calls, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's somewhere around 80?
24, I believe,
How
was
many?
last year, 24.
24. 24 is in an inter-facility call, it's going to make you the money to put an ambulance in aid.
No,
Absolutely
I don't
not.
think we said that.
So that's not going to change it.
Well, are you telling me it's going to change for whoever the provider that comes in with the bid, that piece of the puzzle is the only piece that
If we split it all up, yeah, it could cause a problem. It's not a lot of money for whoever gets the contract. And I don't think it's the best interest of the community to split it all up and just take little pieces of the pie away. Let's live it together, and we've got a process. And I'll say again, Mountain Life is a great outfit. I've supported them for 16 years. I continue to support them. But they want us to change the process just for them. That's what I'm hearing. The transportation plan has been approved by this board last September. It was approved by NorCal EMS, who I sit on that board, I think in November. And you're asking us to go back and start over. Now, we don't have time. We're up against the curve right now to get this together, to get the RFP together and get it out. Our contract is up June 30th. We have to have a new guy in place there, whoever it be. It could be Mount Lifeline, it could be something, it could be, what is it, American out of Reading. There's many providers that can bid on this, and who knows if we'll get it. You're asking us to change this, which we do not have time to do for your benefit.
I think that's an inaccurate statement.
Well,
I
correct
think you
me.
have a
Correct.
process through the state that you've put in order. The RFP is not an exclusive document that hooks right to the proposal. That portion that you put in the RFP, that whoever, NorCal, or whoever decided to put it in, that's never been in there before. It's never been part of the 911 system, and it's an attempt to
Why didn't you comment on this?
Yeah.
Why didn't you comment on this when the board voted on it?
Well,
You had two chances. This board and NorCal EMS both had to approve it, and they have. And I've heard nothing about this till today.
well, I've spoken with two board members who said they weren't aware that those two paragraphs were in there when it came through.
They had this to read last September. If they voted on it, didn't read it, that's not my fault.
Please don't raise your voice. I'm not raising my voice with you.
I apologize.
I'd like to make a comment if I could, please. Keith Crosby with General Manager of Mountain Lifeline. In response to you, Mr. Pyle, we're not doing this for Mountain Lifeline. We're doing this for the citizens of Lassen County. Currently, right now, what we're talking about is transfers of patients that need care immediately from a different hospital. Okay, we're not talking about guys that broke their arm or broke a hip and they can take a slower route to Reno or wherever that is. We're talking about people that are potentially dying. Okay, any delays in that is unacceptable. Currently, we operate an ambulance that sits about 40 feet away from our crews out at the airport. All they have to do when they get that call is jump in the ambulance, go to the hospital, pick that patient up, get them out as quickly as they can to a better facility. Not a better facility, a facility that can handle the care. Okay? I don't care how you say it. The ambulance currently in this county, and one that would come if somebody else were to replace it, is not going to be parked outside the front door of the air crews that need to go, which is a delay. If they come from Susanville, it could be 6-8 minute delay at best. That's on best case scenario. But when they drop that crew off at the hospital, and then they take off for a 911 call, and our crews are sitting there, or somebody else's crews are sitting there for over an hour waiting for them to come back, we're talking about the most critical patients. We could be talking about my parents. We could be talking about your kids, or somebody else in this county that you see in Safeway every day. And they're not getting that, all for 24 calls. We're talking less than 1% of the business currently being done by our ground provider. Less than 1%. A nonprofit organization running in the black, 1%. Less than 1%. Earlier you asked the young lady here before, what is the reason for what you're doing? My question is, what is the reason for these 24 calls being pulled away for better care of the most emergent patients? I've not seen that this is a patient care issue, which is what we're here for. I'm not here for money. No, 24 won't make a big difference in our organization, and if it makes a big enough difference in their organization, maybe they need to do it a little differently, because it shouldn't. We run a lot less calls in Greenville. We make it work. So, yes, we can provide up there, and it's a heck of a lot more than the 1% of their organization if we're talking about what it takes to run up there. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of around 20%, 25%. So, yes, it makes a difference monetarily. We have to stay in business. But in the end, I just hope it's not my family that is having a delay due to an organization that cannot do it as fast as us. I don't care what their argument is. It's physically impossible.
Well, I appreciate that, and I agree with you 100%. It's all about care to the patient. It could be you, it could be me. You know, it could be any of us. I mean, if it saves one life, it's worth it. There's nothing I disagree with about what you said, but I'm not sure. I want to hear from somebody else to tell me that with what we have now in place and what we will have in place, can't not do the same thing. I mean, I heard from you, that's one side. I want to hear from the other side.
I think we have the author of the authors of the draft RFP here.
And Richard, I just wanted to see now, what's the timing of all this? Because the way this needs to be hashed out.
The timing of the RFP.
No, I mean, like, they come back in a future agenda to
Oh, okay, so-
because here is just receiving information.
Yeah, so
And give direction.
let me give you my analysis of that, and I'll defer to Mr. Neera on some of the details. But we've approved the transportation plan, which is currently at the state pending approval. That is a component of the RFP that's being drafted. So a determination would need to be made whether the RFP, the draft RFP, could be changed to delete those paragraphs or change those paragraphs without a change to the transportation plan, or if that would require a change to the transportation plan. That's, I think, a fundamental decision. If that transportation plan needs to be changed, then we've got a real timing issue that will constrict how we can perform the RFP.
And when is that, when is that answer to that question?
To the state approval of
If
the
you can change it without, with,
that, I would defer to Mr. Narad on that specific question.
Rick Nara, I'm Chico State, I'm your ambulance consultant. Could you ask the question again?
Okay, so we have a transportation plan that we've approved as the state plan.
Correct.
Right. The question is, the Mountain Life people are asked to delete a couple paragraphs from the draft RFP, which has not been released. So the question is, does the deletion of those two require a new transportation plan? If so, what are the timing constraints with that? Or would this existing transportation plan allow for an RFP that doesn't have to be
Both the plan and the draft RFP would have to go back through the process of the county recommending it to NorCal's board being the approving authority, and then submit it to the state for their review, which takes God knows how long. The reason I think it would have to, because this is a very significant change in terms of the economic viability of the ambulance within Zone 1, within the EOA area. Okay? And we made a clear statement of intent within the plan that the exclusivity include all the possible costs to make sure that that ambulance is viable. And by removing any cost from it, we just make it more of a marginal operation and less likely that other ambulances will be able to submit proposals or that they'll be able to follow through on it and actually provide the service.
I have a question. Is there anything about the RFP process that would preclude Mountain Lifeline from making a proposal to offer ambulance services in the North County area conditioned on also the acceptance of their proposal for the exclusive operator agreement, having that as a component of it?
I think no.
Did my question make sense to you?
Yes, the reason I'm hesitating on is that the RFP will be specifically for Zone 1, the current EOA area, and if someone were to submit a proposal that was contingent on something else, but it's the other, because it's the other way around, where they're saying this is sort of an added value. If you accept our proposal here, we're also going to do that as an added value to the county. I see no reason they couldn't include that, but the evaluation process for the RFP would be based on what they said they would do within Zone 1. So I'm not sure if the reviewers would consider that as an added value to Zone 1, even though countywide it could.
You know, I was going to ask the same question. I mean, the only way in the RFP is, what can you extra do, as an ambulance service? Outside of what's in the RFP, add something if you got something to add.
We could, and we have an area in there. I'm trying to remember exactly how it's worded, but allowing them to say, wait a minute, let's try this, or we thought of this.
Maybe somebody's got some better ideas.
Yeah, and they run the business. They have better ideas than we usually do. So, so we do have that allow them to do that. But whether it got into a whole new zone design that would go back to the changing the plan, that would probably be a problem.
I don't think you can do it. There's enough time. We're up against the curve now.
That's exactly the problem.
And you're the expert on me. You're the one doing it. Obviously, it's not me. But I'm glad to hear from you. And the other question was, this man brought up a very good point. The manager with Mountain Lifeline. He said they have an ambulance, at the airport, at the big springer there, and they can respond faster than our current provider can. Is that correct? Can they do something that our current provider, or whoever would be the next current provider, can't do?
I'm not really clear on it, because if you're picking the patient up at the hospital, if they said they were next door to the hospital, that would impress me more than they're located next to the site.
Well, yeah, my guess is, you got the hospital, the patient there, they got to get to Reno, Redding, whatever, so the ambulance will take it from there to the airport, and they'll get on fixed wing and whatever. But I think the helicopter station up there, so that wouldn't be included in this, if that's correct. No.
It's a continuity of care issue. You're talking about a critical care transport, somebody that needs something above and beyond what a paramedic, an ALS paramedic can do. You need a nurse, a flight nurse, specifically. Okay? Well, not specifically. You could take a regular nurse, but the hospital doesn't give that to the local agency. So for a fixed wing transfer, and that it doesn't matter if it's Mountain Life Flight or another provider coming into town, the ambulance currently would have to go and pick up the flight crew at the airport, then go to the hospital and pick up the patient, and then take them back to the airport. That is currently happening with other fixed wing providers at the times that we can't be it because we're doing something else. And right now they're experiencing delays in getting the current provider to pick them up. They're dropping them off at the hospital. Sometimes they're responding to 911 calls while that crew is at the hospital, and they're standing around waiting for basically their taxi ride back out to the airport. And there is experiencing delays. That is currently what is happening.
One of the important things is to not compare the current provider to the RFP, because those are two separate things. The RFP that was issued in 2004, that was then extended for a full 10 years, did not include the critical care transport, didn't include oversight and monitoring. The new one does. So if we're having problems of that nature with the new provider under the new contract, that would be more of a concern. But what exists now does not.
You tell me the current provider is doing no inter-facility transfer?
Yes, sir. What I'm saying is that it was not included within the exclusivity that was granted in 2004.
So that's basically open to anybody?
It is open to anyone, and that's why both of the providers are involved in it now, whereas under the new one, we, again, to maximize the revenue coming into the provider, we extended it, but that also includes the oversight process, which doesn't exist now.
Supervisor Chapman.
Yeah, if I could just jump in there. Mr. Chittick said earlier that he had contacted two board members that had expressed not, the difference in Mr. Pyle said, well, they read it and they voted on it. And I wanted to state that I'm one of the two supervisors that was contacted. And I indicated to him, having reviewed the documents that we voted on in September, I felt comfortable at that time with what was presented. We had the consultants involved and so forth. But understanding the language of these two paragraphs and the ramifications of these two paragraphs was not something that I understood in September. And unfortunately, it was not something that was brought to the board's attention at that time, which would have been more opportunity, could have given us to have the chance to have the dialogue and the discussion. The existing arrangement allows for that alternative service. And this language here tightens it down and restricts it to just to whoever would be the successful bidder with the RFP, which is, kind of a significant departure from past practice. And I think that's the concern raised by Mountain Life Flight, and I think they have a legitimate concern. Now, whether I would change my vote or had a different vote last September when we voted on the transportation plan, at least we would have had the opportunity for that discussion. At that time, I did not perceive this as being an issue, even though I read it. I mean, I can read it and sit here and I still kind of read it, trying to struggle with what it's trying to say. And I don't consider myself the expert. I really actually, to be honest with you, Bob, defer to you in many respects because you have been really hands-on and involved. And we do have the consultants that are involved, and I have to trust the judgment. But if there is an opportunity for us to somehow amend the process, I don't want to see us go back and start all over. We just don't have time to do that. But to amend the process to allow for a little bit more flexibility. If this was dealing with, 50% of the market or 40% of the market, it would be a different thing. But we're apparently talking about 1%, a very small negligible amount. And if a business model plan is not going to be successful because it's going to turn on this one particular item, and I have some concerns about the viability of the whole operation to begin with. So, to me, as one board member, yes, I think it's something that we should be focused on, and yes, if there's a way for us to broaden the definition, if we do that without harming the time frame that we have, I think we need to look at and give that consideration, because what has worked in the last 10 years, I think has worked relatively well. And to tweak that or to affect that, I'm not sure it serves the public interest in the long term. And that's what because I've been in the ambulance, I've been in the helicopter flying arena, so I understand the value and importance of the timely response. And if I'm being told as a potential patient at the hospital that I've got to wait for this and that to cycle through, and my wife is the one that's sticking away, it's a whole different ballgame. I guarantee how I approach it. So,
Richard, I think what we need to do is we need to go on with this till 5 o'clock. So we need to know, is there time to change the RFP? And if there's not time, then it's a new point. If there is time, then we need to take action on that.
Okay, let me try to.
Because we really.
I think Mr. Mayor, I made that very clear.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there time to amend it, or is there not?
First of all, RFP has not been released yet. It's currently in draft. My analysis of it is that if we have to change the transportation plan and go back through the process with the state, there's not enough time for that. If we can alter the RFP without changing the transportation plan, there is time for that. That's my analysis.
So would it be an accurate statement that we need to know, is the board, majority of the board, do they wish to give the direction to alter the RFP, provided it doesn't require going back to the state? And if it does require going back to the state, unfortunately, it's time.
I think that would be.
I'd like to move forward and keep that direction.
Well, I would support that at this time. I want to hear the other side. I want to hear the insurance provider, how they work with the inter-facility transfer. And we heard this kind of statement, his side of the story, and I appreciate that, and it's a very important issue. Very important issue. And that the current provider, I know, are doing some of the inter-facility transport. Not my fault, I'm doing all of them. And whoever gets the bid next, how are they going to handle it? I want to know that.
So I guess my deal is this isn't all going to get hashed out there. What are we trying to achieve today with this agenda item?
We're trying to achieve it, and we leave it to take it out. And my knowledge, and Mr. Merrick, and ask him to speak again, is we don't have time. You guys should come to it in September.
The purpose of the agenda item today was a request by Mr. Jett to make a proposal. That's what.
You're basically get the proposal, take it or leave it. It's not an action item. You can act on today. It's been another week. No, it'll be the second Tuesday in January.
Well, we've agendized it for directions, Tim. I suppose if the board directed the RFP altered, we could
when is the RFP due to be released?
July 1st.
The RFP is not going to be able to be released until we get the state approval, so that's the process that we're waiting on. Once we have their approval, it'll be issued the next day, or within a couple of days.
And remember,
Is
this
the
contract
state
is
going
up
to be
to
approving this before January 13th?
I honestly have no way of knowing what the state's going to do and when they're going to do it.
Could I suggest that we ask Mr. Nayrad to pose the pointed question to the state, which is that if we delete those two paragraphs from the RFP, does that require a new transportation plan? Yes or no is the answer we want from the state, and then we can reconsider on the 13th.
Yes, that go through North County, and that's that they make the request. Just please remember that in the plan itself, it addresses the intent area of including everything, and it does list out these areas. So I would be very shocked if they allowed the RFP to be amended without making the corresponding amendment to the plan.
Well, let's ask and see what they do, and if we can have that on the discussion, we can deal with it on the interview. I think it may be a moot point, but we may have flexibility until we ask and we won't know.
where is this area? Where is the North County EMS fit into the change if there was a change? I mean, they obviously voted on this. Now you ask them to change it.
Under the way the law is set now, based on a court case in the past few years, this must go through the local EMS agency. So the county makes a recommendation to the local EMS agency, and their board then is the approving authority for the plan, and then their staff submits it to the state. So it would have to go from the county to NorCal again before it went back to the state.
Well, just
So by the time you go through all this, we're talking about what, the 8th of January, 1st of February?
At the earliest.
At the earliest.
I would suggest that if the plan
Not in the order.
needs to be changed, there isn't enough time.
It's not enough time.
If the plan does not need to be changed, then maybe there is.
We're up against the curve, leave it how it is.
I'll get to you on that. Go to you and you and then. Yes.
I'd just like to remind this board that 15 years ago, there was no RFP. It was open for business, okay? So when you say there's not enough time, if you guys decide to do nothing, in June it becomes open for business again. Is the current provider saying they're going to leave? So what is the time about? You're talking about entering into a 15-year contract, which is what this is for, degrading the system at the start to below the level of emergency 10 years ago. Below the level of emergency.
That's zero.
Well, the facts are there, so I'm just going to use those. So that's the concern, is that we're going to do that and give them a 15 years to make sure that we maintain that low level of service. Now, I don't feel comfortable with that saying, well, we don't have time, when realistically that is a self-imposed time that the county decides to impose. This process does not have to happen. That is why, is what the state says. It does not have to happen. So it can be postponed, done a different way, started over, and if this RFP gets done in December, it gets done in December. That's all it really takes. That's up for you guys to do. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is a self-imposed time. This is not something the county has to do.
So you have a comment?
Yes, public. My name is Dr. Eric Lednick. I'm the medical director for NorCal EMS. And there are several things here that worry me. One, my colleagues at Mountain Life are really doing a quick pro quo, and you need to look at Lassen County as a whole and a public health model. And by doing this, you weaken it. You're talking about, quote, 1% of the calls. However, those are critical patients that have a very high reimbursement. So it's not an insizable amount of money. Secondly, some of the things that were said aren't 100% factual. I won't quote the statute to you because I don't want to bore you. But when NorCal does enforce interfacility transports, and I have the multiple citations if you really want to know. Secondly, very few patients truly need to move quickly. Patients that need blood, well, that's not beyond the scope of the paramedic. There are entities within NorCal EMS currently that do blood, and it's a relatively simple process by going through a module. Secondly, I'm really not sure what a high-level infection is. I've never heard that before. Be that as it may, most patients, we're talking about a patient who is septic, or meaning has a potential infection in their bloodstream. The majority of those patients, unless they're on what's known as vasopressors or medications to keep their blood pressure up, are not time sensitive in the fact that, yes, they need to go to a higher level of care that has greater resources, but waiting a half an hour for the antibiotic to finish really would not affect their long-term care nor their long-term output. As far as a patient with a heart attack, that time is muscle. And whether they get nitroglycerin or heparin, which is another medication that's used in an acute MI, I sit on the state EMS commission, and we just approved El Dorado County for those medications. What we're really talking about is probably a small subset of patients, probably smaller than 24, I would think, that truly need a nurse. The other thing that this doesn't take into account is the Affordable Care Act. And why do I bring up Obamacare? Well, reimbursement is going down, and the free market is very different than it was 15 years ago. And we need to look at the county as a whole and would we be degrading Zone 1 for Zone 2? And they were, the facts were being, at least in my opinion, a little fast and loose, is there's got to be a subsidy for Zone 2, and they made no bones about it. So I'm seeing these as two issues, true, but not necessarily related. So this really looked at a business model. And if we really hear about patient care, then yes, there are times when you do need a nurse, no doubt about it, and time is of the essence. But many of the patients who have a half an hour left on their antibiotic infusion really will not suffer if they have to wait an extra hour. And if you're really talking about a trauma patient that needs blood, that can be hung and delivered. It's done all over the state. So I'm really worried about sacrificing the viability of the entire system for one small piece, particularly like they are working on their own solution to this problem.
Thank you. I just want to go eat out and come back.
I'm Dan Spies, Quincy, CEO of Norcal EMS. There was one other step in the process that we didn't touch upon, and that was the plan was reviewed by the County Emergency Medical Care Committee. It was an extremely well attended meeting. All the principal parties that are here today were at that meeting. It was very, very clear that the plan was to include interfacility transfers for the successful bidder, whoever that might be, as we go out and issue the RFP. And of course, it was considered by this board, and it was then sent to the NorCal, your recommendation, NorCal approval. So wanted to make certain that community members, law enforcement, public health, others, hospital representatives had an opportunity to comment on this, and it was the consensus that it would be all-inclusive IFT for the successful bidder. The other part of that is there's nothing in the RFP that precludes Mountain Lifeline, and they provide an extremely important resource for Lassen County and other parts of the North State. Nothing in this precludes Mountain Lifeline from continuing to operate and transport patients by air at their high level of capability. So, but those 2 points, while you may be aware of it, should be pointed out. Thank you.
Okay, you had another comment?
I just wanted to answer to Dr. Rudnick's comments. You made the comment that in critical care there's a large reimbursement factor. I do a lot of critical care for absolutely no reimbursement whatsoever. So that is not an issue or a true issue. We don't do wallet biopsies before we take any call. We get paid what we get paid. Sometimes we get good reimbursement. Sometimes we get absolutely no reimbursement for quite a financial output. So this is not a financial statement. Also made the comment about the blood being able to be hung and done. Is that currently in this county?
It can be done very easily.
No, is it currently in this county?
As I said, it can be done very easily.
But is it?
That's a moot point.
Well, the point is, it's not a moot point. Currently, the current provider does not transport blood.
Okay.
That's a very simple yes or no answer.
Yeah.
As far as the contention about time or the blood infections, that's really cherry picking your patients. Absolutely, that happens. Other times, it's absolutely critical to get them on the road, and maybe you don't have a half an hour. Maybe it's a surgical intervention that needs to be done, and time's of the essence. So, although, yes, I will agree, that situation does come up where you have the patient who, sure, has some time. If it's a patient that doesn't have that time, and now we have no other option, and now it's your family member. That's my point.
Okay. We're gonna bring it back for final discussion here.
Well, just a couple of fast comments. Emergency, good point that Preventive Care Committee is made up of a broad base of local people. Broad base. I mean, you get the fire department, the city fire department, you got CDF, you have the county administration, you got the OES officer, you have the county sheriff, you have a hospital representative, you have the first provider representative, you have Mountain Lifeline representative. Unanimous decision to support this transportation.
We were not part of a unanimous decision to support that decision. No, we
Well,
were not.
you may have not been part of that decision, but let me say a strong majority of that proper language of that committee to support it. And at that time, nothing was said about these. It's never been brought out. 3 times this has been voted on and could have contribution by the public. For the supervisors, the North County EMS, the Emergency Community Care Committee. One time had this been brought up. And as far as we don't have to do this, a term session, that's BS. We would be totally irresponsible not to get a new contract out by the time the old one expires. And to say that don't matter, it's BS. It does matter. It's the extreme responsibility of the 5 of us sitting here that we do our job and we get these things done on a timely fashion. And to leave it wide open that anybody can do it is not a strong, concrete commitment to the public to know they have a good provider here. Not knowing, the people are not going to be comfortable knowing anybody can come. Who's going to show up? It's going to be South Lassen, it's going to be Lassen, it's going to be someone out of Reagan, it's going to be Remza, it's going to be Semza. That's not a good way to treat our public, and I won't do it. Thank you. And again, honestly, I support you guys. You do a great job. Your air is great. We need your air helicopter space wing. Thank you very much. You guys do you're very professional, do a great job. But on this issue, I'm not going to support breaking the process. It is not best for our people, for this public. I don't care what Mr. Chetty says. And I respect you, Mr. Chetty, too. I mean, it is what it is, and we're going to. I'm going to stand on what I was elected to do, to protect these people and give them the best health care, health and safety possible. And what you guys want to do does not do that. Not making these changes. Not what you do does do it. Making these changes, no. It's not in the best interest of the people.
I want to acknowledge that, Mountain Lifeline, you guys do, my dealings with you through the racetrack, you guys have been over backwards. And I only wish that we would have been having this conversation like 8-9 months ago. And I don't know, but it is what it is. But, and it's unfortunate, because you make good points, even like the blood hanging, like you're trying to get a straight answer and get one. That worries me, But the fact is, it's the end of December, so this can't be done. So I think it's unfortunate.
May I make one more comment? The initial RFP, yes, the initial RFP, as you all remember, when it got instituted, what we all went to bat for, number of ambulances and everything else, the RFP was written in a way, or after the RFP was awarded, actually afforded quite a few changes. We could actually drop ambulance coverage. If you'll remember, we didn't start out with 3 ambulances. It got degraded to that. These are changes that were made after the point, well after the point. I'm just curious, this change is concrete and solid, it can't be moved, but something as to completely eliminate one entire ALS ambulance was a very simple process and happened effortlessly. I'd just like to point that out, that changes can be made even after the point. We're in a point right now, we don't even have an RFP, but no changes can be made.
So I would like somebody, Dr. Marriott or Dan, to respond to that.
I don't think your hands are tied.
Can I suggest it?
No, we've got everybody here now. I realize we've got time issue, but this is a very important issue. Okay, just answer this question and we'll move on to this. Marriott would answer this. I would appreciate that.
I think the question is, have there been changes to the contract since the initial RFP was awarded?
There have not been changes to the contract. Much of the contract, not all of it, but some of it was based not on the number of ambulances, but on the response time. And one of the ways we push for efficiency in an ambulance system is to say to the provider, you figure out how many you need, where you put them, we want you to meet performance standards. Lassen County, because of the geography, you couldn't ask for an 8-minute response time in New Beaver. It's not going to happen. But we did say within the city and the general area around the city, we set response time standards that have been met ever since. If it can be met with fewer ambulances, then that improves the efficiency, that improves the viability of the system, and that's the exact thing we want to do through this competitive process, is to promote not just the stability of the system, but also the efficiency of it.
So after the contract with the provisional order, there were no changes in wording in the RFP in the contract?
Not that I'm aware of. Okay, the contract was amended, and 5 years later, I was not part of that, so I don't know if there was a change then, but I'm not aware of it.
Thank you.
All right, so, what's the direction we're giving?
My direction would be do nothing.
Is it the consensus of the board that it's beyond the time to do anything about this?
I mean, they've had adequate time to make responses, and I wish they would have.
It sounds like to me that we probably are exhausted time limit. And I would say that we have to maintain that course. But if between now and our next meeting on January 13th, the county administration and county council can pursue whatever avenues are and ascertain administrative or other remedies that are possible within the time frame without jeopardizing the long-term process, then I would say that they bring that back to the board at our January meeting. I'm with Mr. Pyle. I appreciate his passion. And I wish there's apparently been 3 opportunities for review. One of them being the board review in September, and it's unfortunate that the nature of these 2 paragraphs and the shift from what we have been doing for the last 10 years to what's being proposed for this next 15 years did not become more clearly understood. And I have to say, I read, went through the document, and I, to be honest with you, we read stacks and stacks of documents, and one person isn't going to be able to understand the nuances of this. And I think had I had the ability and the opportunity to understand the nuances of this 2 paragraphs, I guarantee we would have had
somebody
more,
brought to your attention,
yeah,
and you would understood, and nobody did.
And we were relying on our consultants and others to
But
prepare the language.
to change this today would do one thing, people. Derail the process.
And we can't do that.
All would come.
We can't do that.
Okay.
But
Now, I can bid on this. Maybe they will be the next provider.
If I could just get some clarity on the direction of the board. I have one supervisor saying, go forward, don't change anything, and one saying explore changes. So
well, I think we have to respect the integrity of the process we have right now. But if between now and January 13th, you've suggested, in terms of contacting and talking with, NorCal EMS, with the state and whatever. If the state hasn't acted by January 13th, we don't know when they're going to act. They could act tomorrow, and if that's the case, it's probably a done deal. But if they haven't acted by January 13th and we're able to ascertain that there are some flexibilities in terms of being able to make the adjustments, then by all means we need to bring it back, and we as a board have to deal with it at that time on January 13th. We may have an opportunity, we may not. But we won't know if we don't go explore, and I think it would be remiss not to explore it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And if Bob is right, we'll back him to the hill. If Bob can be modified, we'll modify it. How's that?
Thank you. Yeah.